Welcome to another episode of Unraveling Success. I am excited for our guest today. I have Carla McKean with us. And Carla McKean owns Counseling Kids and Adults, which is based out of Minnesota, multiple locations there. Carla resides, although in Wisconsin, in Hudson, with her husband Jeremy and their kiddos. And in her spare time, I know Carla enjoys spending time with family, friends, and she really, really loves to travel. And previous occupations, even just going back to high school, Carla was a lifeguard, did some waitressing, worked at GMAC in the bankruptcy department, and also has tried her hand at doing some web design, coding, and graphic design as well. So, welcome, Carla. Super excited to have you share your journey. I think it's a really special one, and one that I think people will learn a lot from. And if you want to get us started by sharing your definition of success.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
When I was in grad school for my marriage and family therapy degree, I really loved, I went to Adler Graduate School and I really loved one of the quotes, and I think it really has shaped the way I see success. And the quote is, "It takes courage to be imperfect."
Mm.
Uh, Prior to that, right, I like always, was striving for perfection, I think. And of course, that's impossible. And so probably a lot of grief that caused me. And so, when I would find myself being frustrated about something, or figuring out, can I do this or can I not do this? Do I want to take this risk and put myself in this risky financial situation potentially as a business owner? I've thought on multiple occasions, like, I have courage, like, I can do that. That's easy, right? And so at times when things haven't gone perfectly, just reminding myself that I have courage, it helps with like not being hard on myself for past decision making, or going forward. What am I going to do going forward? I can pretty much do anything with the idea that I have courage. Everything will be okay. Um, and then one other really helpful piece of information that I've gotten along the way is maybe failure is just feedback. And so rather than seeing a situation where you might run into roadblocks, thinking you might think, oh, I failed, right? I don't really think that's a thing. I think that humans have created, the word failure, really is no such thing. It's just feedback, right? So, like, let's see here, an example would be if let's say I wanted to lose 2 pounds and I didn't do that in the amount of time. Let's say I said, I want to lose 2 pounds in a month or something. And I didn't do that goal that I had. Instead of like, oh, I messed up, I'm a failure, what's the point? Being really hard on myself, just like, this is feedback. What feedback am I getting? I'm getting, I ate a bunch of sugar and I didn't, manage my diet well, or I didn't do the exercising that I wanted to. So, okay, like, how can I adjust? And so I feel like I'm in a relationship with the world, and the world is constantly giving me information, feedback, right? For recorrection or corrective action, corrective behavior, corrective thinking about the way that I think about the situation or myself or the world.
Mhm.
Um, those two, like, quotes, I guess you could say, have really made me move into taking chances to have a business instead of, choosing to be an employee and be able to, I guess, maybe be protected by what we imagine a business or a company would be, protecting us financially. Like, if I work for a company as an employee, then I don't have risk, right? Um, so it's those two quotes have, like, I would say that success is like the courage to move forward regardless of challenges,
Mhm.
and then getting information and correcting, uh, constant correction, but not in a perfectionist way, right? Like, so always am wanting to make sure I'm having balance and not like over analyzing and over trying to respond to feedback, because I also need to give myself a break.
Yeah.
Um, I don't want to be perfect. I don't need to be perfect. But that's how I strive in a perfection way, as my
Mhm.
natural, biologically, genetically, whatever. I have this like perfection direction, that's not healthy.
Right.
And so that has caused me life problems historically.
Mhm.
So for people that are thinking, do I want to try this or not? What do you have to lose, really? If,
Yeah.
um, yeah, you could lose some money, but you can get money back, right? You can try it, and if it doesn't work, adjust. If that doesn't work, adjust again, and then,
Mhm.
then you say, maybe at some point, I'm gonna not do this. Maybe you're not good at organizing, or maybe you're not good at time management.
Mhm.
Some people aren't good at. I don't think anybody's not good at being an entrepreneur or their own boss, so to speak. I think the people that think they're maybe incapable of it are just scared,
Yeah.
of taking chances, and
Yep.
rightfully so, right? It can be scary, but
Mhm.
yeah. So is that good?
I love that. It's funny because when you and I were first just kind of talking before we started the podcast, one of the notes I wrote down when we were just kind of talking through your path and that type of thing was, and I feel like this is a really common thread that I'm really realizing is that you just need to be brave enough to roll the dice on yourself and bet on yourself, which um, I think both the quotes of it takes courage to be imperfect and failure is just feedback, those all tie, right? Because having the mindset of failure is just feedback and having the courage to be imperfect, like that all leads to then being able to roll the dice on yourself, you
Hmm.
know? So, yeah, I think it's a beautiful answer. I think it's awesome. Um, so as I was learning about your journey, like in a nutshell, um, I know that to get where you are as a licensed family therapist, right? There is quite a journey to get to that point, and I know that I mean, there's a lot of school, there's a lot of experience that you need to gather along the way. And so do you want to share with us a little bit about, what first like brought you to being interested in being family counseling therapist? Like what brought you to that? And then also then the second part of that question would be then what was the journey that you had to go through then to get to where you were fully licensed? Because those are two really big parts of your story.
Yeah. So, I am a recovering alcoholic, I guess you could say. I wasn't like you know, a park bench bottle of booze in the brown bag person.
Yeah. There's
I was a party animal when I was in my 20s, like late teens, early 20s. I had a lot of fun. To like the detriment of me, right? I always liked helping people. And I can be kind of funny, and like I have I guess, decent personality. So I didn't really know what I wanted to do with I got sober, right? And I'm like, who am I? What now, right? I had already gone to college. At that point, I was in my mid 20s when I got sober. And I liked helping people. And I was attending AA meetings and sponsoring people, and I had a sponsor doing my own counseling. And I kind of just was like, well, I don't know what else to do. I don't really know what I'm good at, which I think a lot of people do. I'm still doing that. I think at times you step back and go, what do I really want, right? I'd really like to travel and hang out with my kids and family. Can someone pay
mm-hmm.
me to do that? Um,
Yeah.
but I think that pushed me down the path of like behavioral health, addiction counseling, and marriage and family therapy. I had 3 years of college credits when I dropped out of college when I was, I think, 21 maybe. I had like 116 credits. I went to Mankato State at the time. It wasn't Minnesota State University, but I was, but I didn't, I had like, did some secondary education. I was doing Spanish. I was going to be a high school Spanish teacher because I have several years of speaking Spanish in high school and college. And then I, dropped out. And then when I got sober, I went on my merry way for a couple of years and partied. And then I got sober and I'm like, I don't know what I want to do. Well, I'll do this, right? So I went to Metro State and got my 4-year degree in addiction counseling. And it's really interesting. So for an addiction counseling degree in Minnesota, and a license. So you have an addiction counseling degree you have to get a 4-year degree, and then you have to get a LADC, which is a addiction counseling license in Minnesota. Part of the licensure and the schooling is interning. You have to do an 880-hour internship, which is about 6 months-ish, right? I worked in I interned at an adolescent treatment center for kids with addiction, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they, these kids are awesome. They would change so much. And then their family would come for family week or family night. And it was like, "Ooh, these parents are horrible." Like you can see how the kid becomes the way they do because the parents are controlling or one or the other's mean or the parents are in constant conflict. So it's clear, it was so clear to me the family problems related to
Mm-hmm.
addiction and why people end up the way they do. And I could say the same thing for my childhood too. I mean, I had what I needed, but my parents didn't always get along. And but the counselors at the treatment center were super crabby and they were like burnt out. They were all over 50 years old. They had been doing addiction counseling for 20 years, 30 years. And I was like, if I do this for a living, am I going to be crabby and miserable? Because that's how it felt, right? And at the time I'm a Christian. At the time I was going to a church, and we had custody of our nephew at the time, and we had been bringing him to the counseling clinic at the church. And I was telling the counselor there that was meeting with him about, this internship, and like I didn't understand much about what another degree option could be or the mental health world really. I didn't really know what I didn't know, right? And I was just telling him how it kind of sucked. He's like,
Mm-hmm.
"Well, you should go to school for marriage and family therapy. It's like great, right?" I'm like,
Right.
"Oh." Somewhere along the line, along my path, someone told me my decisions are probably the worst ones. So maybe I should let other people tell me what to do or give me direction, right? And so I didn't really know. I was just like, well, I don't like that. I had worked at Hazelden at the time. And so I was like, okay. And I'm like, where do you go to school for that? And how much does that cost? And how long is that? And he's like, go to Adler Graduate School because that's where he went. He really loved it. And I was like, okay, I'll do that. And so I did that thinking I'm going to get away from the addiction treatment environment. And I worked in it at the same time, right? I was at Hazelden for a few years, and it was kind of a toxic, unhealthy environment, just negative, right? Just like it seemed like lots of counselors like depressed.
Okay.
Um, and so I went to the mental health field, which marriage and family therapy is the discipline area that I got for my master's degree. Kind of like I'm running away from this other thing I don't like, and I'm going to this thing that I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
Uh, that's kind of a lot of my pathway in life has been like, well, I don't like this. I'm going to do this. Or
Mm-hmm.
talk to people. I don't like this, and other people are like, hey, try this, right?
Right.
It hasn't historically been a lot of this is what I want, and I know it's out here. I'm going to seek it out, right? I've kind of been pushed through
Right.
discomfort, not liking stuff.
Mm-hmm.
However, being a Christian is really helpful because I feel like acts of service and serving others is the cornerstone of Christianity. And when I'm serving others, I'm not thinking about myself, right? And my being hard on myself or whatever. And so a good solution to help people with mental health is like help someone else. If
Mm-hmm.
you're depressed, give someone a call and ask them how they're doing. Um,
Right.
And so how did I get in the behavioral health field? I got kind of nudged and pushed through
Mhm.
not liking the environments that I was exposed to.
Yeah.
Um, and so I've had that as really one of my values with the practice I have now is making sure that the providers are like the priority. The patients are not the priority, the providers are. Making sure they're paid well so they can take time off and do good self care, do family time. And I feel like if they're doing well, they're going to be good therapists. It's kind of like the oxygen mask on the airplane thing. If I don't treat myself, I can't help others. Um, and so I feel like that I'm not getting pushed through life, right? I'm seeking, like, I'm moving in directions that I'm choosing now based on like what is in the best interest of, helping others, the therapists that work with me, and me too. But as an owner, you kind of put yourself on the back burner, which is a definite balancing act challenge. Being an owner, like, what do I deserve? How much time off do I get? So I ended up in this field because I want to help others. And there were people there to help me. I wouldn't be here today if there weren't other people there to help me. And
Hmm.
I feel like giving back what I've been so freely given just feels really good. So
Yeah. So you worked at Hazleton for, I believe it was around 10 years, right? And during that time, you went through the intern. Is it called an internship for the, I mean, I know there's a number of hours. It's not internship. What is it?
so the addiction counseling is an internship. They're both internships, whatever practicums, call it what you want. Clinical experience, client rotation, whatever. I worked at Hazelden from 2007 to 2016, 17,
Hmm.
um, and did my internship actually for my addiction counseling degree. I did my internship at a different facility through Fairview. They have an adult. I wanted to work with kids, I thought, and I still do. I enjoy working with kids, but they had an adolescent treatment center near where I lived at the time. And so I
Hmm.
worked at Hazelden and I interned.
Okay.
And I did my because when you intern, you take less courses. So
Mm.
I was taking courses the last couple I needed for my degree, and I was interning.
Okay.
And then I was also working at Hazelden, I don't know, like 20, 30 hours a week. I can't remember exactly at the time, but
That's a lot.
um, yeah. And then when I did my marriage and family therapy degree, there's a 500-hour internship you have to do during school. And then
Okay.
when you get your degree, after you finally get your degree, you take your licensing exam, you need to
Mm.
do 4,000 hours of interning
Yeah.
as a therapist. It's interning, but you've got a master's degree at that point, so you are a professional.
Yeah.
The industry might call you a practitioner rather than a professional until you get your license 2 years after you get your degree. So, I mean, anybody that wants to do this kind of work, you're looking at 6 years of school, 2 years of postgraduate internship or
Hmm.
clinical experience to get your license.
Yeah.
So it's like 8 years, 9 years.
Yeah. I don't think I ever realized how much time it took. That's a
Yeah.
lot of time. Yeah.
It's a lot of time, and it's really, there's been changes recently because there's a shortage in the industry of providers. So they've reduced some requirements. In my opinion, I think people should you get your master's degree after you do a 500 or a 700-hour internship, you get your license right away. I mean, I don't,
Hmm.
there's so many drawbacks to not having a license because you can't bill independently. And
Yeah.
so you can't do your own thing unless you have a supervisor, which I did. I was able to start my practice and I had to hire a supervisor. You have to pay for clinical supervision of your 4,000 hours, which is 150 bucks an hour for 200 hours
Yeah. That's a lot.
before
Yeah.
you get paid well. And
Yeah.
people just they can't afford it, and they create a lot of debt or they take out a lot of student loans. So I think there's some room to grow in the industry. The challenge is that the more we reduce the expectations, then the more the pay is going to likely go down because insurance is going to go, oh, you only need a 2-year degree to do this or a 4-year degree. We're going to pay you half as much.
Right.
And it's a threat to the current people that are in the industry. And so
Yeah.
it's definitely a challenge.
Yeah, I
Um,
can see that.
yeah.
Yeah. It makes it there it's complicated. It seems it at first blush it seems like it would be a really simple thing to address, but you're absolutely right that I can see how it could not work out well for people that are currently in the industry that have gone through all that work and the time, and that having that not be honored would not feel right. Um, so talk to me then. How did you start your practice? How did you start counseling kids and adults?
Yeah. So I started in 2013. So I got my license, my marriage and family therapy license in 2014. So I essentially hired a clinical supervisor, got him credentialed with health insurance, and then was able to bill under him. So I had to meet with him. He had to sign all my paperwork. Um, that was how I started before my license, right?
Okay.
So I was interning. Part of that 4,000 hours that I had to do, I was interning at the church that I went to had like a free counseling clinic. That supervisor that I told you about earlier, that well, he was a counselor. So okay, there's a counselor and then a supervising counselor. They're like same thing, right? But you have more experience.
Hmm.
So the counselor that recommended that I go to Adler Graduate School, so I started there. I had no idea you had to do an internship or anything. I started there and they're like, okay, you're gonna have to do an internship. So I went back to him and I'm like, hey, you told me to go to Adler. I'm there now. Will you supervise me? And can I do hours in the clinic? So he let me do that. It was free. I didn't get paid anything for it. They have a free counseling clinic 1 night a week, which is it was just fun. I didn't care if I got paid. It was a learning experience.
Hmm.
Um, and let's see here. Where was I going with that?
It was
Hmm,
how you started. And so if you hired a
that's right.
supervisor that would oversee you. So that was like your beginnings. And then how many did you start? Like, how did you get the word out? I mean, it was an organic start. So like, how did it flourish and bloom into flash forward? What did you say that you started in 2000? You got your license in 13?
So I started the business in 2013. I got my license in 2014.
Okay.
My second license. I already had a addiction counseling license. So it was kind of interesting. I got a little office in Lindstrom, Minnesota, 1 room. It was like 300 or 400 bucks a month. I thought I'll do this if I get in network with insurance through contracts. I'll keep doing it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so people at first people just did private pay because it took me like 3 to 6 months to get insurance contracts, and the only ones I could get were Blue Cross and Preferred One. I wasn't able to get United Healthcare. They weren't adding any new therapists to their network, or any of the other health partners. They weren't letting people in their network either, or new pro like clinics or whatever. And so I just did private pay, 20 bucks, 40 bucks, whatever their copay was, which was nothing. I didn't expect to make any money. I just wanted to cover the office rent that I had. So it was just me for, let's see, probably a year and a half, maybe 2 years. And I was finishing my hours, getting my license right, probably not too long after I got my license in 2014. So I had said I was working at Hazelden as well at the time. Well, I had built, I had friends there, and literally my caseload was full. So I was seeing 20 to 30 people a week in my practice, and then I was working at Hazelden. I decreased my hours there over time because I was on call, so I could work as much as I wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so eventually my caseload was full, and I was referring a lot of people outside of, to other places because I didn't have room on my calendar. And so a therapist that I worked with at Hazelden called and was like, are you hiring? I'm like, well, what? I don't like hire, this is me, I'm like, well, I do refer all these people. You could see people under my insurance contract, and then instead of sending them elsewhere, I can have you could see them, right? And literally, so we've got, I think, 9 or 10 therapists right now. Uh, 75% of them are people that I've known from Hazelden. They get burnt out in the industry. They call or reach out, and they ask if I'm hiring. And that's kind of how it's grown. It's just grown. I haven't thought, oh, I'm gonna pump a bunch of money into marketing and build this up into this huge thing. I've never thought that. I've kind of just thought, whatever. I feel like it's like a God thing. Whatever is the direction that I need to go will be shown to me, I feel like. And so I've kind of just like, if I don't get some sort of sign or information that would lead me to think that God is part of the plan, I don't do it.
Mhm.
And so if things line up and I'm able, then I'm like, yes, that seems like it's a matching thing. If I'm fighting at it, and
Mhm.
sometimes God wants us to fight at some stuff, like pushing through some of our challenges. But it's really been a lot of with ease. I have, I haven't thought I want to be super successful. I've just done the best with what I have,
Mhm.
without acquiring my own large amount of debt, right? I don't want to take a loan out and take a
Mhm.
business loan and have all this debt. I have enough debt. I have student loan debt, and I have my own mortgage, and um, so it's been extremely interesting, and I feel really good being able to help these people that are kind of miserable, right? They hate their job. Um, they work 50 hours a week in a treatment center, because there's a ton of paperwork. And that, the addiction treatment center has a really high acuity rate. So these people that are getting addiction treatment are very sick. They have their whole life is falling apart. It's not just they have an addiction. They lost their job. They don't have a driver's license. Their family won't talk to them. They have health issues. Um, of course, they can't stay sober, or they have mental health issues on top of it.
Yeah.
So there's just a high burnout rate with that. And people come and work for me, and they make like twice as much money and work less. So it's kind of
Yeah.
a
It's a no-brainer.
no-brainer.
I mean,
Hmm.
it serves its purpose. And honestly, like you don't go into the industry that you're in with the intention to get rich. It's truly because you have a heart to help people. Like I feel like you're not attracted to your industry for at least that's my perception. Like the people that are attracted to what you're doing are truly have a heart to help. But you're right. I can understand how environments like Hazelton have a shelf life to it. I mean, I'm even just thinking like in prior in my past, like just running a dog rescue with, and that we focus just on pit bulls and Rottweilers, which is an exceptionally difficult area just because there's such an overpopulation area and overpopulation issue, and then you have a smaller pool of people that are looking to adopt those breeds. And I'm just thinking about the compassion fatigue in just dog rescue world compared to when you're really boots in the ground, like for your full-time career with people. And you know that would be, yeah, it has to have a shelf life to it if you're going to preserve your own quality of life too. you know I can
Yeah,
I
yeah. I mean, very similar. The population is harder to help.
Yeah,
Uh, the
yeah,
people helping, right? The counselors in addiction treatment,
yeah,
or the people that are fostering rescue animals or whatever. You know, they probably also are like, I want to help everybody. I want to do like this over
yeah,
helping, probably, right? So the balancing act there with just that personality that really just loves animals, or just loves people and wants to help them,
yeah,
um, can be a challenge. Yeah,
yeah,
and the the gap between the helping entity, and the individuals or animals that need the help. Like there's a huge amount of help
Yeah.
needed, right? And not enough help. And so then that
Yes.
just exacerbates the burnout. So the
Totally.
people we do have, we're just doubling up on them, right?
Yeah.
Um,
100%. And that leads to how long of a shelf life there is, you know. You said a couple things that I wrote down, a handful actually. So I thought one thing, there was two things that really resonated with me, um, because I say the exact same thing in my story. So you started your business in 2013, whereas it's funny, I started Aspire in 14, so we just turned 10, so and you're 11, so you had you're a year running start on us. But two of the reasons why I started Aspire, one is because in agencies that I had worked at before I ventured off to start my own situation, all insurance people were so crabby. They're so crabby. And I was like, I really love this industry and I want to stay because I feel like I'm in a helping profession, in a very different way than what you do. Like, that's our approach. And I was so tired of being around people that were crabby that I really wanted to start something where, like, I had a vision for something, a place where people like had some element of joy or were kind and not crabby. And then from a leadership standpoint, one thing that you said that I am so specific about is that, if I just make sure that my team is well cared for, like my job is to take good care of them and their job is to take care of our clients. And I feel like that is a mark of a good leader, but I also think, um, I know what led me to that, like leading that way, is when I was led not that way. And it
mhm.
makes you realize how important it is, like really taking care, for you, like taking care of your practitioners and those being at the heartbeat of like where your priority is. And then so that they can do a good job at taking care of other people. So it's kind of like creating, a little bit of like a ripple effect in life. So those couple things when you said them, I was like, oh my gosh, that's very, it's, I can really relate to that. So 11 years in, and 10 practitioners working for you right now. I know you have two locations, which is very funny because even though we're 10 years in, we have also have 10 people in two locations. So there's a lot of funny parallels here, which is also funny because even though I know you, I hadn't drawn those conclusions before. So um, talk to me a little bit, about, you talked about with Hazelton and burnout and therapists and that type of thing. Talk to me a little bit about, and then you also talked about the need for more therapists. Like there's a shortage right now. Talk to me a little bit about, in the 11 years from the time that you started, and what you've seen with therapists and just in your industry to, present day. Like what changes have you seen? What trends are you seeing? As from an ownership standpoint, you have a very different lens. So can you give me kind of like a flash through of how you've seen things change and trend over this past 11 years?
Yeah, so trying to so like 2013, 14. I think the biggest change in the industry is technology. So of course, here we are, video, right? Video counseling. I think a lot more people are able to get help. We will see people that they're on their lunch break in their car, right?
Yeah.
People that have a family, you got kids in sports, you don't have time to like go to counseling once every week or once every couple weeks. You got a lot of things going on, right? And so access to care has improved because of technology. And the federal and state government have a lot to do with trends in the industry. I think a big change agent was in 2011, when the Mental Health Parity Act was passed. It was like part of the Obamacare kind of thing,
Mm-hmm.
where basically one of the problems in the industry before was that mental health and addiction therapists, if you compared that to like a nurse practitioner who has the same training, or a physical therapist or a chiropractor, this is very similar like pathway of training and clinical experience, right? Um, the costs for reimbursement were like half as much for mental health and addiction. And so then, of course, places that offered care couldn't pay people as well.
Yeah.
And so attracting people to that industry was a challenge. So
Mm-hmm.
they passed that act in 2011, and it looks all great on the surface. But guess what? There's no accountability. There's no reinforcement, and so health insurance companies said yes, okay, we're going to pay for these things, but they didn't change the rates necessarily. So they started actually offering the care for. I think in 2007 maybe there was another law that was passed that they had to, like, insurance companies had to offer something, but it was like they didn't offer barely anything, or the rates were super low.
Mm-hmm.
And the health insurance industry didn't understand or know much about mental health, or addiction therapy, what it entailed, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
like they didn't know what they were paying for, and
Yeah.
they kind of applied the medical industry expectations to the same field, which is
Mm.
really helpful for them because then they could just deny care, because especially the addiction field was not evidence based. It was like
Yeah.
super weird treatment approach, like 12-step AA meetings. That's helpful, and it's proven effective, but it's definitely not medical terminology. It's like have a
Right.
higher power and a spiritual experience. Like none of that is clinically evidence based. Not nothing, right? So they got away with for a few years of denying funding for treatment because they had these expectations that the industry be providing
Mm-hmm.
clinical care and documentation that's more evidence based. And so the field changed, right? So going through school, evidence based practice was like a big thing, right? Because we need to prove that what we're doing is working, and
Right.
helpful. The insurance companies they had a point. They used it to
Mm-hmm.
their advantage, of course. And treatment centers and programming took a while to come around. That was a big experience that I had at Hazelden, where we would have a patient in treatment. They used to just get a 30 days. Yep, the insurance was like, yep, we'll pay 30 days of treatment, right? All of a sudden, the insurance company was like, we'll pay for 7 days of detox, and then in a week, you need to send us more information to see. We're going to decide if we're going to pay more days. So that type of treatment is typically, by history, it's like a 3 to 5 day authorization for funding, and then they reauthorize every few days, which is
Okay.
super stressful and expensive for a
Yeah.
treatment center to continue to do. And insurance
Absolutely.
companies are, you can't just call and get the person you need. Like it doesn't, it's not functional.
No.
Um, and so that's a big part of the burnout too, right? Because you have to pay all these other staff members to do all this extra work, and then that means you can't pay your counselors as well.
Yeah.
And that industry, to be honest with you, the addiction counseling industry or addiction treatment industry is still not great. They still don't really fully. They're still stuck in this weird world of like how we used to do it and how we should be doing it.
Yeah.
Um,
Antiquated,
and
huh?
a, yeah, and a lot of people are just they don't like change,
Yeah.
and so you get a lot of stagnation because of that. The mental We do outpatient mental health, and so it's a little bit different. We don't need to get lumps of days funded because it's not really that expensive. So like 100 $150 for a counseling session per week is much different than $20,000 a week.
Yeah.
Um, and so and the mental health field has had some clinical evidence history, right? Like the field of psychiatry and psychology have been around for a long time. So we have a lot of evidence based stuff that has been pulled into what training and
Hmm.
criteria for funding. Um, so that's been a big issue. And so then in 2011, the Parity Act was passed. It wasn't enforced. The federal government, there was no consequences for insurance companies. A year and a half ago, we finally got our reimbursement rates changed.
Good.
We got pretty much got it's almost a double.
Wow.
Commercial insurance for, if you have it through your employer, it's a commercial insurance policy.
Mhm.
The rates have doubled pretty much. I mean, in 2016, when we started with a Blue Cross contract, they were paying like $70 for a 45-minute session.
Mhm.
Now that same session is like $110.
Okay.
Still not great, but better, right? But the catch is that all these insurance companies, they kind of use Medicare and Medicaid as a guide for what they're going to pay and what they do. And
Okay.
Medicare and Medicaid are super low.
Yeah,
The
they are.
rates are really bad. Um, and so I don't know if the insurance companies got fined or the federal government finally came in and said you need to be fair and reimburse higher, but
Mhm.
all the insurance companies changed their rates like a couple years ago. I think COVID made a difference too because it was like, oh my God, everybody's mentally ill, and now we got twice as many people to
Yeah,
treat. We
yeah,
didn't have enough people to begin with.
yeah.
Um, and insurance companies are actually because they have all the information. They have all the everything about you. They know every single thing
Yep.
everywhere you go. Everything.
Data's
If you
king.
have a
I know.
smartphone, they know where you
Yeah.
are. They know what you're doing, right? There's a lot of evidence to support that getting people mental health care actually reduces their expenditures on overall care throughout the year, especially if it's a person who has a high emergency room or urgent care like
Mhm.
admission rate, right? Because those cares take those are really expensive.
Yeah.
And so insurance companies, I think, have enough years of evidence to show that getting to fund this one type of care increases the odds that the person's not going to cost as much.
Yeah. I can see that.
So yeah, so I don't know like what happened behind, legislatively that made a difference. And every state is really different too. Wisconsin is very different from Minnesota. I'm licensed in Wisconsin as well. I don't practice in Wisconsin, but um, Wisconsin is like, back in the times a little bit. On very
Surprised.
few hours a week teach at a local college. So I've got interns in one of my classes. They're all interning at treatment centers.
Mhm.
And I'm like, oh, Wisconsin doesn't have really much treatment. There's not a lot of treatment. Like, there isn't any. Like, too bad you don't have it. None. There's like a very small amount of treatment compared to the people that need it in Wisconsin. And a big
Mhm.
part of that is Wisconsin's, legislation is more conservative. The idea is lower taxes. They just don't have as much welfare type support mechanisms.
Yeah.
So, I mean, a lot of people end up going to Minnesota. So trying to think of like so COVID it was a big change agent with the trend as well of lots of people having mental health issues that didn't have them before because everybody was like locked in their house or whatever. Marriages were not doing well, and actually a political conflict is I I don't know since 2016. Whether it's the Trump administration causing it, or I think it was like him and Hillary in 2016, or the resentment of the the Democrats, doing lawsuits, but it created this like big swell of political division. And I would say I have had tens, maybe 100 couples. They're getting a divorce because they have different political beliefs. And
Mhm.
the COVID stuff spills over into that, right? Like you
Yeah.
see a lot of like COVID, whether, belief in COVID or testing or, the
Yeah.
vaccine or whatever, like political alignment is connected to that.
Okay.
And so it caused a lot of problems in marriages. It caused like families that are divorced where each parent, they're co-parenting, right? One
Mhm.
parent would believe COVID was a problem, the other one wouldn't. And it
Yeah.
caused a lot of problem. It just was like, um, so COVID changed a lot with that. COVID also, I think, opened up the eyes kind of. We haven't seen changes yet, but the HIPAA law has, patient rights, privacy, that kind of thing. There's another law that's a part of the HIPAA law, which is HIPAA high tech. It's this huge long law about technology requirements for like maintaining confidentiality and privacy, right? Um, telehealth got like more acceptable in 2020 when COVID happened, but the HIPAA high tech law is like super outdated. so,
Yeah.
so there's a
Jeez.
big gap between like HIPAA it kind of strangles you as a provider. It's expensive to have the correct stuff, the correct technology, and like we outsource that, right? We have a company we pay that does all of our like health telehealth, all of our electronic health record stuff.
Mhm.
So we are able to rely on them to understand what the heck this 100 megabytes per second. Like I don't understand the deep stuff in that. And the HIPAA law, the high tech law, is all this like IT language that
Mhm.
most people wouldn't know. Even an IT person, unless they're trained in that, wouldn't understand it.
Okay.
And it causes a lot of, it makes it take longer to do everything. They add another like regulation or law, then they add another one. They don't get rid of old ones. So you're doing like 10 things
Mhm.
that are repetitive. Um, and,
Yeah.
a part of that too is like health insurance companies will oftentimes want to blame another entity for an issue. For example, more recently, year and a half, 2 years ago, there was um, the No Surprises Act, which is like providers aren't supposed to, or hospitals or whatever, aren't supposed to surprise bill the patient. Like the patient shouldn't go in for you know, office visit and they had to use a pad on the bed and charge like $800 for that like pad. Surprise billing, right? We didn't tell you about our fees ahead of time. We just had you in and then we like charged you like crazy.
Yeah.
Um, so part of the reason that that happens is because insurance doesn't pay a lot of times, and so I think providers are forced into a position to like overcharge to get to
Hmm.
survive. Um, but health insurance companies are like, oh, we this is such a problem because the providers are overcharging. Don't be mad at us, be mad
Hmm.
at them. And so there's a lot of that where like you see these laws come out, and it's like one more thing we have to do. We have to always have um, all fees published on our website, right? Or they need a paper when they come in that shows it, or there needs to be a sign in the waiting room. And that's it's easy to do, but each insurance company pays a different amount for each
Yeah.
service, and they
Yeah.
change it several times a year. And every employer plan is if there's a union policy, it's all different.
Yeah.
So like we're in this weird position where it's like, well, we don't really know how much you're going to have to pay because your insurance dictates the rates.
Right.
Um, and so there's laws like that. There's like several other ones that like it's just one more I'm the owner, so I am always the one making sure we're up to par with following laws and regulations and new things that come out. And
Right.
tax law can also have a big impact on how things are done.
Hmm.
State of Minnesota has something called a provider tax, which is it used to be 2% of our income we had to pay back to the state of Minnesota as a tax to help pay for Medicaid. So we take Medicaid and get lower rates, and then we have to give a bunch of money to them, right, for covering it.
Something feels so wrong about that, doesn't it?
It's
Like,
it's like it's like triple taxation or something. I don't know. It's like, we're paying income tax and you want us to, well, it's an expense, so we don't pay income tax on it because it's a write-off. But um, and another law that came out in the last year is the state of Minnesota is requiring each of the commercial insurance companies that also offers Medicaid. So, like Blue Cross in Minnesota offers Blue Plus, which is a Medicaid plan.
mm,
If I want to get a contract with Blue Cross, by history, I could just do commercial insurance and never do Medicaid at all. Well,
right.
now Blue Cross is requiring the state is making them. If you want to keep your Medicaid contract, Blue Plus, which is the Medicaid Blue Cross plan, the
Hmm.
state of Minnesota is requiring the insurance company to make all the providers basically you can't get on our network unless you take Medicaid as well. It's a
Oh,
challenge and a hurdle, but we take Medicaid because it's part of, I think we should help everybody, right? I just
mhm,
don't feel right about it. And there's in Lindstrom, one of our offices, there's just a lot of people on Medicaid.
mhm,
Um, and so it's like, if you if you want your insurance company to pay for care, um, you have a very limited amount of options for providers.
mhm.
And then if you make the providers, so what happened before is we had an over influx of Medicaid people that wanted help. And so our percentage of Medicaid clients was higher because the other providers in the area maybe weren't taking Medicaid at all. So it
Mhm.
forces the people that are trying to do the right thing to actually, it's a negative impact on your business. So it's good for us because we were taking Medicaid already. But it's just one more thing you need to do. One more, oh, I want to get a Blue Cross contract, but if I'm new, right? Now I got to get a Medicaid contract, and their
Yeah,
system is really archaic and dysfunctional.
yeah,
Um, so yeah, it's all entangled.
yeah,
And it's really, it makes me want to like run for office, but nah.
yeah.
Okay.
It's funny because hearing your perspective of contracting is actually that's my same experience with contracting too, both with health insurance companies and with property casualty is very similar. And a lot of like it'll be one company but multiple different contracts. Some companies have, a different contract for even life is different. Life insurance is different than personal lines is different from their commercial lines contract. Like it'll be the same company, but multiple different contracts. And then within that, different expectations of us as an agency too. So yeah, contracting is a whole different animal and it's not fun. And we have the same thing with us as well. Like, you have the different rates. They have the same with us as well. And they change them too,
Yeah.
up and down. It's like a moving target and what they want is different. Sometimes they want, you know, certain lines of business and they turn others off. Sometimes but then it'll be completely flipped in 6 months. So even just tracking that from one company to the other is
Oh,
crazy. Yeah. One of the things that you made a really funny, and I don't know if you knew this or if this was intentional or not, but your comment about putting your oxygen mask on, like when you're on a plane, and I don't know, but I'm going to buy this book for you if you don't already have it. But one of my favorite books is called Your Oxygen Mask First. And have you heard of that book? Or have I ever talked to you about that book?
mm, there's so many books.
Yeah.
There's
So this
so
book,
many mental health books and
yeah,
self-help books. It's like I probably
yeah.
heard of it,
So this
but
book
I don't remember offhand.
so I read this book probably 3 years ago, and it's a book actually specifically written for high performing entrepreneurs. And it's written about the special intention and cadence of care that we need to be making sure that we're taking of ourselves as business owners or entrepreneurs, um, in order so that we can also give the best of ourselves to our team and kind of like leading into that ripple effect that like we're going to be taking care of our team so our team can take good care of our clientele. And so that it was so I'm buying you that book because when you said that I was like, oh my gosh, how ironic is, your description to kind of what we're talking about. And this book was very pivotal for kind of getting me. It was a very convicting book at the exact time that I needed it for me kind of getting myself back into the cadence of actually like doing a good job of taking care of myself. Um, so as we're talking about, putting on your oxygen mask first and ownership, what have been just for you as a leader, um, like one or two of the biggest challenges that you've had to navigate in ownership when you start, like you and I both started from scratch, and then you get into, managing multiple locations, managing, teams. Um, that comes with a variety of bumps and bruises along the way. And what have
Hmm.
some of your most pivotal lessons, I guess?
Hmm. And you kind of challenges or lessons, right? Like it's pretty sad. And this counter contradicts the whole taking care of myself. Um, as a business owner, you have to outsource things, right? So like we have to outsource a tax accounting. We have to
Hmm.
outsource attorney, legal documentation, stuff like that.
Hmm.
Um, those have probably been the biggest challenges for me, the most time consuming. I used to do um, I used to do all of it myself. When you're small, you have a Schedule C, simple, right? I've always done my own taxes like on TurboTax, which I thought was great for just an individual person, or a Schedule C, where you add your small business to your own individual filing. Relatively simple, straightforward. TurboTax is very good, user friendly at guiding you to understanding what they're asking for this. What does that mean? Um, when we got bigger, I needed to change that up, right? And so I've had a couple accountants over the years, and it's interesting. It's like when a licensed or certified accountant, when they do my taxes wrong and it costs me money, um, it's really discouraging because I'm the one responsible. I'm the one who gets an IRS, interest fee later if I didn't pay enough or they find something I should have done differently, right? And the IRS doesn't find stuff where they owe you money and then send you money. So when I'm talking about this, it's always they only will, penalize you when in their mind, you didn't do it right. And I haven't ever even been audited to know, and I don't want to be.
Hmm.
And I'm really like, I want to make sure that we do it right, and we
Hmm.
don't have to come back later and have a nightmare.
Yeah.
Because I did it myself all those years, I knew a good amount. And so when I hired the first person I hired, I had them do a regular Schedule C. I didn't switch over to an S corp at that point yet. Um, but the following year I was going to. So I'm like, I'll get accountant now, get it all set, and then next year I'll do this, right? Um, well, so I was a little hesitant. So I gave them all my stuff, and then I went on TurboTax like secretly. Like, I had an
Double
affair.
check.
I had an affair with TurboTax and like secretly did my own taxes to compare if he did it right. I think that story is really funny. Well, COVID happened in the meantime. And I don't know if this guy does annual training or what, but there was a ton of COVID laws that tax stuff, right?
Hmm.
And I was an independent. I was self-employed. I wasn't an employee. So when my kids got kicked out of school and I had to stay home, I didn't get paid. I didn't get unemployment because I didn't pay into the unemployment system because I was self-employed.
Right.
And so when I did my taxes, it showed I got like a $10,000 refund because TurboTax was like, "Are you self-employed? Did you take time off work? Well, now that you're filing taxes, you can get credit for that, right?"
Right.
And so that was there was a couple things, but that was the big one. I basically I had several days where I didn't work, because my kid, like I had toddlers and kids in daycare and you can't just leave them home alone. And then my other two kids were doing like homeschooling, right? Um, and so I was like, I'm pretty sure I should have had a $10,000 refund. He's like, well, you owe 2 grand. And I'm like, he had to like go research it, right? And then he charged me for that.
Yeah.
I just like, and he's not, if I didn't do that, I would have never known, right? So that was like the first time I tried to outsource accounting and it made me skeptical.
Yeah.
I went with him another year and he like doubled I mean, he just charged me a ton of money when I know how long it takes me to do it, right? And I didn't like that. And it was kind of surprise charging, right? It was like, oh, I owe 3 grand for an hour or two. Like what?
Yeah.
And he paid someone else to do it anyway. But, um, and I've had attorneys drop paperwork for me and it's like, they send it back and like, oh, review this before whatever. Right. So I had a guy, an attorney drop a purchase agreement for a building, and it had like the old people's name and address in it. Like he uses the
My
same
God.
document for every person. I'm
I
like,
had that in my this last deal that I did. I had that happen. The
I'm
same.
like,
It
you want a
was
several
an,
$1,000 retainer?
um yeah.
You didn't have someone check it? Like, I don't even care if he does it, right?
I mean, I was
Um,
God, I read it. I mean, I actually read the whole thing and I was like, but yeah. But
yeah, so, and they're not accountable. Like, if I go into a business deal and it's bad, nobody comes back and says, "What attorney did you have? We're going to sue them." No, they
yeah,
sue me. And I've never
yeah,
been sued. But so
yeah.
I've been in this kind of weird dance where it's like I did get another accountant, and that it was similar. My I had him doing payroll. It got all screwed, messed up. Every payroll was wrong. And so I tried them for like 2 years, and it was there were so many mistakes. The amount of time I spent fixing stuff, I could have just
Mhm.
done it myself. Um,
Mhm.
so that's been the biggest challenge. Is like I want out, and I don't know if COVID did something to our brains where like other professionals are like not good at their job, or the tax code and legal code is too confusing for even them. I think maybe that could be true too. But the biggest challenge is like I have a hard time trusting stuff that I want to outsource,
Yeah.
especially taxes and legal stuff, because those could put us out of business.
Yeah.
Um, Other little things, marketing or whatever, no big deal. We're not breaking the law. There's nothing, not a
Yes.
not a big risk like that. But so trusting outside professionals has been really, really challenging.
Mm.
And very time consuming, and threw me into a place like this last year where I wasn't able to do very good self care at all because I'm sitting there trying to learn tax code. Actually, it was really helpful. I learned a lot. I know of things that I can decide to do now during the annual year before
Mhm.
tax filing season comes up next year that will benefit us that I wouldn't know. I wouldn't
Yeah.
know that there's different things like, there's different people types that you can hire as employees that there's federal or state incentives for, I wouldn't know that, right? Like giving someone getting out of prison a chance, I didn't know that that can be helpful for an employer's when you can get like tax credit. I've never done it, but I didn't know that, right? So when we go to hire, it's like, what kind of population am I marketing to? Am I marketing to like vets, like PTSD vet? Because those people like they have a harder time getting jobs, and so it's good. There's an incentive for employers to hire people that you might have more challenges with as an employee.
Mhm.
So it's a double-edged sword. It's like it's good. I'm learning a lot, but I'm also like my this last year has been crazy because I spent lots of time trying to learn about tax stuff. And the IRS doesn't know.
Yeah.
So we're up against like dealing with public government entities that are really, really crummy. How do you
Mhm.
expect a business to do well in the United States when the people that are trying to enforce the like tax code don't even understand it?
I totally agree with you. Yeah. Yeah. I agreed. Um, well, I this has been super fun and you are a wealth of knowledge. Um, so I just appreciate your heart behind what you do. And I think there needs to be, you know, more people out there like you. So, to learn a little bit more about Carla, or if you would like to visit the website for counseling kids and remind me the name again. I always get this. Oh, I was right. I always feel like I get adults and kids, like which one is first, but counseling kids and adults. We will put links to contact information and website in our show notes. So, thank you again, Carla, for joining us today. Super appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.